Thank you for the introduction, Rizwan, and hello to all of you. I am truly excited to be here with you today and to share some of my perspectives with you. But there are many ways in which we can listen to something, and in this case, to what I'm about to tell you over the next 15 to 20 minutes. And I would like to point out three specific ones. The first one is that you can listen for confirmation. And that is when you're comparing with what I'm saying with your own way of seeing things. Oh, I agree with her on that. I don't like what she's saying about that. So when you're listening for confirmation that we share the same perspective or the same viewpoint about something. Now you can also listen for information. And that is when you're listening for new facts or for things that sound interesting, things that you don't know yet. And when this talk is over, you might think to yourself, that was inspiring. And then you go about your life in exactly the same way as you did before. And when someone asks you about this talk, you might share your takeaways with them and how much you liked it. And that's about it. You walk away from this talk with information and nothing really changes. Now, the third way that I want to point out in which you can listen is when you listen for transformation. And transformation really means change. My life is going to change because of what I hear today, what I learn here today. And it starts with insight. It starts with seeing things that you didn't see before or seeing them in a new perspective than the one that you had before. And when you're listening for transformation, you are asking yourself, what am I going to hear today in this talk that I might then use in my life or that I might use in the world? And then afterwards, you are going to apply what you've learned and you're going to test what you've learned and you're going to experiment with it. And that's what listening for transformation really is. It's not just listening and what you're hearing, but also what you do with it afterwards. Now, how you choose to listen to what I'm about to tell you and to any of the other talks or presentations that you will be attending during this conference is, of course, completely up to you. None of these ways is inherently better or worse than the others. So I invite you to choose the way that will be the most valuable and the most powerful to you. Now, this talk is titled Regenerative Leadership for a Sustainable Future. And regenerative is one of those words that is used a lot these days. Regenerative farming, regenerative tourism, regenerative finances, etc., etc., etc. It's one of those words that gets thrown around often, but the thing is that it doesn't necessarily mean the same thing to different people, and especially when it's used in different contexts. So take a moment to think about what regenerative means to you personally. How do you define regenerative? And what came up for you when you read regenerative leadership in the title of this talk? Now, for clarity, here are some ways in which I personally use the word regenerative. Regenerative as in the process of being formed or created again. Regenerative as in being changed radically and for the better. Regenerative as in the renewal or restoration of a biological system, such as forests, either after injury or as part of a normal process. Regenerative as in revitalizing or restoring a person's whole being happiness. And that includes their physical, emotional, mental, relational, and spiritual well-being. And regenerative as the improvement of a place or system, especially by making it more active or successful, or to making a person feel happier and more positive. Some synonyms and related words that I also use often as well are recharging, recreating, rejuvenating, and revitalizing. And when we look at the spheres of influence relating to regeneration, a very simplified version might look like something like this. It all starts with our personal sphere of influence, what we do, and our personal behaviors and actions. And when we talk, for example, about our behaviors and actions that are related to environmental sustainability, it might look something like recycling, using reusable water bottles, taking public transportation, eating more plant-based meals, etc., etc. So those are the things that are visible to the outside world. And when many people do similar things, it spreads, and it spreads into the following sphere of influence, which are their communities and organizations that they belong to. And when those communities and organizations do many similar things and have the same approach about certain topics, that in turn can impact the next sphere of influence, which are the wider societies that they belong to. And the way our wider societies choose to live and regulate what is acceptable and what is not acceptable is what ultimately determines the state of our planet. Another term that we often hear and see in the field of sustainability is whole systems thinking. Now, as most of you know, whole systems thinking starts with the idea that everything is connected and impacted by other things, even if it's not clearly or immediately visible or obvious. And this approach looks at things as part of a larger whole rather than as separate parts, rather than as individual parts. And it's used in many different contexts, from forests to organizations to economies and many, many others. And we often forget to apply the same approach, the same idea of everything being connected and impacted by other things, even if it's not immediately or clearly visible or obvious. We often forget to apply the same approach when it comes to people, when it comes to ourselves as individuals. So let's call that whole person thinking. Because often when we look at leadership, we look at the leader and how they fit into the system of the organization that they belong to. But we don't take into consideration that, shockingly enough, leaders are people first and foremost as well. And as such, we don't apply the whole person thinking, and that everything is connected and impacted by other things, even if we don't see it immediately. Who we are is how we lead, writes researcher and storyteller Brené Brown. In addition to that, great leadership also requires self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and the capacity for vulnerability, amongst other things. Now, I would add that for leaders in general, but especially for leaders in the field of sustainability and environmentalism, who are working towards a more sustainable and regenerative planet, that there is another requirement that is of great consequence, namely the capacity for personal regeneration. because increasing and improving regenerative practices for external systems while ignoring the personal part is like treating the symptoms without looking for and treating the cause. And in fact, I would go as far as to say that planetary regeneration cannot happen without increasing our capacity for and practice of personal regeneration. And I will explain a little bit more about that in a minute. Now, I coach leaders in sustainability and environmentalism, and I coach them to restore and recreate the parts of their life and work that don't feel regenerative. Now, some topics that often show up in our conversations are professional and personal overwhelm, high levels of stress and burnout, um, a lack of well-being in whatever sense of the word, whether it be physical or emotional or relational, um, feeling like we're running out of time and that the work that they do doesn't really seem to make a difference, and lots of other things. But if who we are is how we lead, you can see how experiencing feelings and emotions and viewpoints that are not really regenerative may negatively impact our ability to lead and to make a positive difference. So looking again at the spheres of influence, we might add an extra circle within the personal one, so that we don't only consider the actions and behaviors that we exhibit, but we go a layer deeper to the things that are not visible to the outside world immediately. So our thoughts and our beliefs and our feelings and our general way of being. Because what we think and believe and feel has an impact on our actions and behaviors. Now, let me give you an example to illustrate this. A large charity organization hired me to work with some of their leaders to improve their leadership skills. And one of the leaders that was assigned to me was struggling with the way they felt about their body and about food. And at first, they were very hesitant to talk to me about that because we were supposed to talk about leadership, right? But as we did exactly that, as we were exploring their thoughts and their beliefs and their feelings about food and about their body, they started to become more confident. And people at work started to notice and started to give them compliments about it. And at their next performance review, their manager praised them for having grown so much as a leader. Yet in our conversations, we never even discussed how to become a better leader. Who you are is how you lead. Research shows that when we feel positive emotions, it has a lot of beneficial effects. And there are really too many to list them all here, but I want to share a few of what I think are the most interesting ones with you. So positive emotions broaden our awareness and they enable us to see the bigger picture. They also increase our creativity and our problem-solving capabilities. They improve our psychological resilience and coping resources so that we can handle it better when things aren't going so well. And they lead to higher job satisfaction and better work performance. Research also shows that in general, happier people are better leaders and they are more successful at what they do. And the opposite is also true, that the less happy someone is, the less likely they are to be a successful leader. So who we are is how we lead, and happier people are better leaders and more successful at what they do. And in the work that we're in the fields that we're in, going for doing whatever we can to achieve environmental sustainability and justice and equality and equity for all, to have any hope of achieving those goals, we must bring our A game. We have to be at our best. And so prioritizing our own personal regeneration, our own personal well-being, is therefore not only important, but essential. Because cultivating our inner resources to support our present and future needs, and those are our physical needs, our mental needs, our emotional needs, our spiritual needs, and our relational needs, the needs for our relationships. So cultivating our inner resources to support those present and future needs is essential so that we can make the greatest impact. Because if we don't, if we're too busy or we don't even think about it, we may actually be slowing down the progress of the important causes that we have dedicated ourselves to. Because paradoxically, slowing down and cultivating our personal regeneration will likely help us actually to be more productive and to make a greater contribution. So in this case, it's literally that we need to slow down in order to speed up. So what I hope you will be leaving this talk with is a strong desire and commitment to include personal regeneration in your own way of making a positive difference to the world. Starting with just one single area in your life, you can apply it, test it, experiment with it, and make it your own. And regardless of whether you are an official leader at work or not, I invite you to start by leading yourself first into personal regeneration. Because in doing so, you're not only increasing your own well-being, but you're also improving your capacity to lead others to be more regenerative too. We cannot afford to not be at our best. Because if we're not at our best, the chances of achieving sustainability goals that we have and justice goals and equality and equity goals, the chances of achieving all those goals go down. So I repeat what I said earlier, which is that I believe that planetary regeneration will not happen without adding personal regeneration, in addition to all the work we do for the external systems to become more regenerative and sustainable. And one of my favorite quotes is by author, philosopher, and professor Sam Keen. What shapes our lives are the questions we ask, refuse to ask, or never even think to ask. So here are some questions to get you started on your own path of personal regeneration that you can ask yourself regularly. Which area in my life is not regenerative right now? And if you're struggling with that question, here are some follow-up questions that might help you get started. If someone took hold of my life tomorrow, what do I think might be the first thing that they would change? What am I tolerating these days? What is a truth that I'm not tolerating, that I'm not accepting? And what judgments do I have about myself? If it was actually me creating this area as not feeling regenerative, how might I be doing that? What am I doing or thinking or believing about this that is not regenerative? What would make this area feel more regenerative? And who would I need to be for it to feel more regenerative? Which habits, thoughts, or beliefs might I need to change for that to happen? What might I need to do or see differently? And what is my first step in creating this area as more regenerative? Which action can I take right here and right now to start to change this? So these are some questions to help you get started. And to share another one of my favorite quotes with you, this one is by author, philosopher, and civil rights leader Howard Thurman. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive, and then go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And in the context of what I've shared with you here today, I would actually like to adapt it a little bit. Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you feel regenerated, and then go and do that. Because what the world needs is people who are regenerative. Thank you.